Hello, late night Anya here, and I just got out of the shower again, so my hair is still fluffy. While I was getting myself ready for bed and doing my 5 minutes of art for the day, I had a couple thoughts pop into my mind, and one of them is a thought that I've had repeatedly over the last few weeks and months, and something I kind of decided last year was when I have a thought that feels stuck in my mind in the way that it makes me maybe scroll through comment after comment after comment on the subject, or have the urge to maybe argue with someone in Twitter comments. Instead, what I wanted to do was take a moment to write down the objection that I have or the thought that's coming up for me. And I think I just got an eyelash in my eye. Oh, what goes out, what goes in must come out. I don't know if that's how it works with eyelashes. I wanted to write down the idea that I was having and kind of flesh it out a little bit more. And not so I can retort back to someone, but more so that instead of being a swirling fragment of an idea, I give it the time and the effort that my attention on it is calling. And then I can either move on from it or realize it's actually a more important thought. And then I can put it out in a more important way rather than just as a simple response. So in this case, I haven't at all written anything down or really fleshed anything out, but I kept having this thought pop up. And so I felt like I should do something about that. And then another couple thoughts were also swirling around in my mind at the same time, and somehow they feel a little connected. So as I was drawing for the evening, my resolution last year, I think in maybe June, was to do 5 minutes of art every day. And I've stuck to it since then, which has been really nice. And I was just doing this really rough little sketch of a heart, and then the scribble turned into two people inside the heart embracing. And there was fire around the heart because I was thinking of Fire Walk With Me, and it said, fix your heart so die at the top, and then kind of some yellow trees, probably Douglas firs, grew up behind the heart, and then this little person looking into the scene just popped up at the front. It wasn't very good, but it felt nice to just move my hands. And I was thinking a lot about expressing from your heart, once again, as I was yesterday. And that sort of merged into the other thought that's been whistling around in my brain. I don't know if you spend any time on Twitter. I spend probably too much time on Twitter, now known as X, whatever people want to call it. And something I see a lot on there is this real kind of rise of some sort of online alt-right, which I'm sure there's a real life alt-right rising in tandem with it, but it feels like online it takes a slightly different form. I'm not going to go into the politics of the whole situation, but something I notice a huge amount of is this idea of like a return to more traditional or valuable or artistic times in these people's minds. And also the idea that modern society has abandoned beauty and we need to bring back beautiful things and working hard. There's so much that could be said about that. But the thing that always comes into my brain is, in what world is it creating beauty to spew hatred out onto the internet? And I'm sure in some circumstances you could have a lively debate with someone who says, well, what you see as hate, I am seeing as pushing back against some kind of harmful norm. And I'm not going to agree with you on what you believe all of those harmful norms are, but I think if you want to sit there and try and educate based on real facts, like, I'll have a debate with you. But largely, what I see is people posting a whole lot of classical Greek sculpture and paintings from the Impressionists and saying, look at how beautiful things were. Everything's so ugly now, and all women have shaved green buzz cuts and nose piercings. Everything's so ugly now, we should go back. And I think to myself, how are you creating beauty by simply saying what you find ugly? I don't have a lot of respect for someone who wants to talk a whole lot about artists of yore without supporting the artists that they love now. And they'll say there are no good artists now, which just shows that they don't really engage with the art world, because there's a lot of amazing classical artists right now who need support. And a lot of women don't have green buzz cuts. And if they do, you know, that doesn't mean it's ugly in a philosophical sense, I believe, because I think ugliness goes beyond mere aesthetics. Um, that part is my own personal opinion, and I need to flesh that idea out more before I can say anything about it. But inevitably, all of these sharings of the art that they think we should return to is kind of coupled with these horribly stated, objectively ugly comments about women or minorities or the state of the world today. And I just think to myself, in what world is verbally abusing someone using the ugliest words you can think of to intentionally hurt someone? How are you bringing beauty into this world? Do you honestly have any kind of an argument for that? Not to mention the fact that the Impressionists at the time were shunned for their approach to art and were often not allowed to exhibit in mainstream art salons because their work was considered unrefined and ugly. So you also clearly aren't really very into art if you don't know that hindsight is definitely 2020 on great art, as with many other things. So there's sort of this one side to it where I think, by creating so much ugliness, how do these people ever think that the world they are striving for will be anything other than ugly and hateful? And then on the other side, you also see them really denigrating anyone who is too earnest. And I think that there are definitely people who would probably fit into some kind of alt-right category who really believe in earnestness and speaking from the heart. And while I might not necessarily agree with any of the rest of their thinking, I have a great deal more understanding for anyone who seems truly passionate about what they are speaking out about, and can also respect the fact that other people are equally as passionate about their own ideas. And I'm not talking about people who are full on Nazis here right now. I'm talking about people who maybe say we should have monogamous relationships and women should work from, as housewives again, which I don't agree with, but I think, there's an argument to be made for why that's a good life versus what we have now. But then you have people who are speaking out about how they want more beauty and this world is ugly and we should return, and art is just modern trash and fashion is just modern trash and everything is trash these days. But then when do you ever see them speak from the heart truly? If this is all that's in your heart, all you have in your heart is ugliness and hate and misanthropy. But I think a lot of the time it's more just that they are incapable of being earnest and honest and in touch with any of their feelings, because it's not just things that are ideologically opposite of their beliefs that they are saying this against. It's people just truly being earnest and caring. There's this real hatred that I see in that group of anyone who gives too much of a shit, And it's cringy, and this isn't just alt-right either. This is something that I know a lot of people right now are talking about, the overwhelming wave of just ironic art, ironic expression. Everything is irony. And why can't we just be a little earnest? Well, because people will trash you. People will sit there and say, oh, cringe. Oh, couldn't imagine that being me. Just like they find it so embarrassing, which in my mind is solely through projection. They're projecting how they would feel expressing something that clearly comes from such a vulnerable and tender space. And that thought is kind of blending in my mind with this idea of just exactly how much we need, not just because we're having this rise of this alt-right full of hatred and supremacist ideas, but because even on the like left side, which I mean, what even is right and left anymore? I feel like that's an old dichotomy that is kind of, we're still stuck in it, but it's not really what's actually happening anymore. um even on the left side, even on the progressive side, there's still this sense of caring too much is a little bit embarrassing, or it all needs to be kind of cloaked in something that is not entirely sincere. And often that lack of sincerity is coming from more of a soft, cushioning, protective place. We have to make sure everything sounds okay and doesn't come across wrong, and this fear of being cancelled, and all of it is just kind of leading to everything needing to be posed in such an obscure, ironic, abstract, and dumbed down way that everything just kind of feels a little bit like nothing. And Even with people who are extremely sincere, it feels like the only kind of sincerity that is intellectual enough is sincerity about how awful things are, or how stupid something is, or how much more something needs to change. And it's not to say that things don't need to change or that there aren't awful things, but I feel like we just need so much more of just people sincerely caring and loving something and waxing poetic about it. And then the other thing that was popping into my mind in relation to that was also just the idea that we really need to bring back authentic self expression so that people feel how good it feels and then realize what a small box they're putting themselves in when they subscribe to these ideas of cringe and it's not that deep and don't be so sensitive and everything that kind of comes along with that on the right and the left. And it truly just feels so good to just really sincerely feel good about something or feel emotional about something. And the less space you give in your mind to thinking about all of the things that need correction, or the the ways that other people are embarrassing or not smart enough or not getting it, the less room you have to actually just feel into. And when I say self expression that you're feeling into, I don't mean in this individualistic sense. I mean more in the sense of that we have this human self that is greater than any single one of us. The human self that leads to you being more similar to your neighbor than you are different. And I think it's that kind of self expression that is so missing in the world at the moment. It's like you can't dance if you're not good enough at it. You can't sing if you don't have a good voice. Don't play an instrument if you're not going to practice and be great. When, if you think about it, people have been dancing and moving their bodies and expressing these subconscious human emotions before we were even humans. And you don't need to be good at it. You don't need to understand why exactly you're doing it. You don't need anyone else to understand why you did it or why it was important to you. You just need to really sincerely let what's in your heart and deeper than that, in your subconscious human self, come to the surface. And I just really think that that is the source of so much of the hate that we're seeing at the moment, is these people who are so trapped in the logos of it all. Logos, I don't even know how you're supposed to say that out loud. It's all about the thinking and the intellectualizing and the I understand my own thoughts. I understand, therefore, everybody else. Anybody who isn't thinking about all of the whys and the logic of it is an irrational fool who I will pay no heed to and throw away any insight that they may share. But at the same time, if you don't believe that there's this human self that goes beyond just your in group and encompasses all humans, it kind of leads to these situations where you have people who think they know everything about themselves and their own in group, and And also everything about all of the in groups that they dislike, and have this insight into the actions of others that others can never hope to have for them because they're not logical enough, not rational enough, not intelligent enough. And there are some things about being human that we understand without any kind of intelligence. Babies understand them more than we do. And I just feel like if everybody just dropped a little of their embarrassment and lack of earnesty away, I think we are all earnest people on the inside. Some of us are just suppressing it so deeply. We all have this heart that's screaming things out constantly. And I feel like I know so well that when you don't allow that voice to actually ever speak to you, it starts screaming in this muffled, distorted voice, and it just comes out as hate. Hate for everybody who can be earnest. Hate for everybody who doesn't hate themselves and everyone else. I don't know how much sense any of that made, but it felt that's what was coming up in my mind. Here's what I wrote in my little journal, because like I said, all of those ideas were kind of popping up all at once, and I felt like if I just started talking about one of them, I would then start talking about four completely different ideas. But the idea of sharing your heart, sincerity, love, and beauty, the online alt-right and ugliness in art, bringing back true self-expression, the human self. I just think I'm not going to pretend I have enough intellect to necessarily explain all the other problems I see in online alt-right spheres, which unfortunately seem to be intersecting the average person's online experience a lot more these days. But even outside of people who define themselves as alt-right, you see it everywhere. People in YouTube comments saying, man, if only this were Reels comments, saying that they would be able to be nastier there. People in Reels comments just saying the nastiest things they can get away with. People looking for someone who looks happy in a photo and then commenting something about how ugly they are. And you go and check their replies, and everything is just saying something nasty to something else. Because we live in this world where negativity, with our negativity bias and then the way that's programmed into algorithms, negativity just gets so much more attention. This video would probably get so many more views if someone found it and decided they fucking hated it. And then they'd potentially share it to other people. It feels like it's so much easier to get attention through just being unpleasant or hating something or being nasty than it is by just being open and honest or making something beautiful. And thankfully there are people who are making beautiful things who get the attention they deserve. But I think one of the most beautiful things I've done for myself over the last decade was trying to just stop thinking about the things that felt ugly or unpleasant to me, because when I focused on them, it was all that I could see. And it was coming from the fact that I was seeing so much of it in myself and other things also. But just, that's just on my mind at the moment. A lot of things are swirling around in my mind, and I never know if I really make a lot of sense when I talk about these things, because normally someone interrupts me and says, Anya, what the fuck are you talking about? Or, someone online comments as I'm talking out loud and says something that sort of brings me back to the original track that I was talking about. Isn't it funny that even though online can be so hateful, if you curate your online space, you can often find so much more acceptance and openness for all of your strange and kooky ideas than you would ever be able to in the real world, or I have been able to in the real world so far. Anyway, something that was also in my mind while I was talking about this was the idea of trying to explain how all of the thoughts are in my brain in the first place, because I don't know if I ever talked about it in any of my other videos, but I don't have an internal monologue or a visual imagination. So I also see a lot of people online saying that people like that are just NPCs with nothing going on in their heads. And to me, at least, I have a lot going on in there. I think, anyway. Um, but it feels to be quite different to the way other people experience their thoughts. Uh, so maybe that would be interesting or valuable to talk about in some way. Um, leave a comment if you want me to talk about that at some point. Leave a comment about any of this. Tell me what you think. Do you think that people are too concerned about what's ugly instead of creating something that they find beautiful? I just think artists back in those days had patrons who paid them just to create beautiful art to adorn things with. How can you live in a world now where you say that artists should get a job and contribute to society and then say we don't have enough beautiful art anymore? Walk the walk, man. Sponsor an artist, you know? Anyway, take care of yourself, drink some water, get some rest if you need to.